your background, and some of them might not be familiar with what a sleep consultant actually is slash
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm one step further. I'm a gentle sleep consultant. So for those
Oh,
that have heard about sleep consultants, we help teach parents how to help their children sleep better. I am a gentle sleep consultant, so I don't use the typical sleep training techniques of controlled crying or cried out. I use
yeah.
really holistic and responsive techniques because I believe that children learn much better when they're feeling like they're being responded to and they feel secure in their environment and all that sort of stuff. So um, that's my approach and my niche and what I used with my children, and I found that it worked really well for me. And the thousands of families that I've worked with have also found that it's worked really well for them as well. So
It
yeah.
must be like the most rewarding thing. I got a sleep consultant when my eldest hit the 4 month sleep regression, but it must be just the best feeling to know that you're actually helping these families, because it's really the whole family, um,
Absolutely.
to finally get that relief. That must be like
It's
such
very
an amazing
rewarding.
feeling. Yes,
Very rewarding. Yeah, absolutely. I love it.
so cool. Um, and I love that what you mentioned there. So I think I worked with a gentle sleep consultant. She didn't call herself that, but I think that's a really interesting point to touch on, the crying out method, because I think a lot of mums are really afraid of that,
Mm.
and maybe it puts them off from engaging with, like, I think sleep training has a really negative connotation for a lot of people,
Yeah.
because it kind of sounds almost like, I don't know, it's like a boot camp for kids, and it's like, you will sleep. um, can we just discuss that a bit? The kind of the cry out method, and I guess the fact that for me, I feel like it's a bit outdated and
Mm.
very scary. But what are the, I guess, the negatives and the drawbacks to using those type of methods?
They are very outdated.
Yeah.
They really are. They were invented when there was a need for parents needing to do sleep training on their own. So if you think about many generations ago, we used to have night nurses that used to be the ones that dealt with the babies overnight, and the parents didn't need to deal with that. And then that became outdated. There was a need for a technique to help parents cope. That's when this was invented, and there obviously wasn't monitors back then or anything like that. So if a parent was able to walk to the other side of the house, it didn't seem as bad. And oh, are we there?
Yeah.
Oh,
There.
sorry, it paused. um, yeah, it didn't the crying didn't seem as bad. And look, it does teach babies to sleep, but I don't love it because it teaches them that no one's coming back for them. So if they're tired, they may as well sleep. There is a slight difference between cried out and controlled crying. So cried out is as it sounds, just leaving the baby to work it out until they fall asleep. Controlled crying is responding to them in gradually increasing increments to help encourage them to self-settle, but so that they don't feel as completely abandoned. So leaving them
Yeah.
for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes at a time. And again, doing that until the child eventually falls asleep. So one of the reasons, other than I couldn't do it with my kids because I was quite
Yeah.
anxious and I just didn't want to do that to my babies. One of the big reasons that these techniques aren't ideal is because when you leave a baby to cry for more than 2 minutes on their own, they start to release cortisol, the stress hormone. Now, if you
Yes.
think about how many naps and overnight sleeps you're using this technique to try and teach them this new skill, when you give them the opportunity to have elevated levels of cortisol quite frequently, it ends up that their body thinks that that should be their natural level of cortisol. So if you think that our natural baseline is essentially a zero, unless we are in danger or something happens, and then it, peaks. For babies, unfortunately, that are left multiple times and end up having increased levels of cortisol, they have that for the rest of their lives. And that causes things like
Wow.
more extreme separation anxiety, anxiety and depression as teenagers when they hit puberty, and then as adults as well. And I think we're seeing a lot of the results of that from our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, and our generation.
Yeah.
It's not as obvious with our grandparents because they didn't seem to talk about it very much, but it was definitely there, and we've seen the flow-on effect of it as well. So,
So
if
fascinating.
yeah,
I definitely like that technique wasn't offered to me. The consultant that I used didn't believe in it, but I just wouldn't. I mean, I don't know. For those of you watching who have little ones, the instinct is just there when you hear them cry, and especially when they get into that really distressed cry.
mm,
Not going to them is like overriding every single motherly instinct that you have.
yeah,
So it seems odd to me. Um, should we talk about a safe sleep environment? And also thought we could tack onto that as well, like creating a sleep environment that is conducive to good sleep, because that was one of the things that I went through when I had a sleep consultant, and I found it so helpful. As an example, some of the things that I think a lot of people tend to maybe put on their registry, like sleep mobiles over the cot and having lots of stuff on the walls,
yeah.
actually are really distracting to babies. Would you agree with that for sleep?
100%. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so look, I don't mind things on the walls as much as I dislike having a cot mobile.
Yeah.
They are not just distracting, but they actually cause overstimulation as well. So it's having the opposite result with what you would ideally hope for when when you're trying to put your child down to bed. So yes, less is more when it comes to decorations and things like that. But then in terms of a safe sleep space, you want an empty
Mhm.
cot or bassinet. You don't want material cot bumpers because if the child, rolls or moves and is up against them, that could be an asphyxiation risk. You don't want any toys in their comforters, anything like that until they're at least 8 months of age. And the only thing that is sometimes helpful is a blanket or something along those lines, but it has to be something big enough that you can tuck the majority of it underneath the cot mattress. So Ergo Baby, they brought out like a tuck sheet, which is like the equivalent. So something that's secure at the bottom of the bed. So if the baby moves
Okay,
up the bed, this won't move with them. So if
yeah,
you do have a blanket or some sort of sheet, you want to make sure that it's securely attached to the cot so that it won't move around and become loose with the baby, which is obviously then a risk.
yeah. And then what about in terms of blocking out light? We found that was a huge game changer with my son, um, for nap times particularly.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that, like in an ideal world, children should be able to just sleep. If they're tired, they should be able to sleep. But in particular for older babies, like 6 months onwards, because they are so much more alert and interested and easily distracted, the darkened environment can be so helpful to just minimize all of those distractions, which often cause sleep issues. The other reason, well, there's a couple of other reasons actually for the dark environment being really helpful. One is when a baby comes out of a single sleep cycle, they tend to flutter their eyes a little bit, move around, get into a new position. If there's no difference between eyes open and eyes closed, it's just going to encourage them to go back to sleep and roll into the next sleep cycle. The other factor, which is a huge factor, is that the way that our circadian rhythm, the internal body clock works, is that being exposed to natural light, bright environments tells our body it's daytime, produce melatonin, and then going into those darkened environments tells our body it's nighttime, even if it's daytime sleep, release that melatonin. And the melatonin is what helps support babies falling asleep independently and staying asleep for reasonable amounts of time instead of catnapping and things like that.
Yes. That was actually something I remember as well. We were recommended before nap times and before bedtime to try and get outside
Mm,
so that they were getting that sunlight exposure to then help the amount of melatonin that would then be released when he went into the dark environment for sleep,
exactly. Yeah.
which he loved. honestly.
It's a nice way to finish up like an awake window. Like they're getting a bit more fussy and you know that they're coming close to being ready, but they're not quite there yet. So going for a little walk in the garden, even on, rubbish weather days, standing at a window and just letting them look at the trees and, the cars driving by is a good alternative because they're still getting that exposure. But it's, just not, not going out into the elements necessarily.
I can't remember. I feel like it's a Scandinavian country. I want to say Finland or somewhere. I remember it kind of went viral at some point last year because there was mums posting pictures of all these prams lined up outside.
Yeah.
And apparently in this country, don't quote me, it's probably not Finland, but
No,
I feel like
it's
it's
true. No,
somewhere.
it's true.
People
It's
leave their
Finland,
babies.
Denmark,
Yeah.
all through Scandinavia they do this.
But
Yes.
so let's say they're going into a cafe, they just leave the baby in the pram and not like, we're talking babies that like can't move here before anybody on who's watching is like, oh my God. But that was the reaction of the internet. They leave their babies in the pram outside and they go into a store or a cafe and everyone was like, oh, how could you leave your baby? And people living there were like, well, here, nobody would take the baby. Like, we're not even concerned. It's just standard here. And I find that so interesting. And I'm sure it's actually, I'd love to see the studies on the effects on their immunity and what their sleep is like. And I reckon I love the concept. I think it's sad that we definitely couldn't do that here. I don't feel like it would be safe.
Definitely not. No.
But yeah, don't leave your babies outside. We're not recommending.
We don't recommend that. Yeah.
Do not
Not in
endorse or
Australia.
recommend. But I find it fascinating that that is just standard practice there. I'm sure it's for many of these reasons.
Mm.
Very interesting. I was gonna go into then some sleep readiness,
Mm.
like independent sleep readiness, but I think also something that kind of links with that is I guess sleep training, for lack of a better word. I don't like that term personally. And then or when is the right age, or what are the right, how do you know when they're ready to start a routine? Because I remember with my mother's group, I think it was super early. Some of them were already talking about having a routine. And I remember going, what should what's this? Should I be doing this? And just, I didn't see how I could possibly do it because he was just still demand feeding. And I thought there's no way. So I think it's really helpful to let people know kind of when is the time to be getting them into a routine and how do you know when they're ready to do that?
Yeah, so there's two sides to this. There's the baby's readiness and your readiness. So,
Yes.
and I'm going to start with your readiness, like as a parent. If you are desperately sleep deprived and you're not coping and your mental health is suffering, you can't be the parent that you want to be when you're that tired. So sometimes you've got to just be like, you know what, this isn't working for me anymore. I've got to do something. There is nothing wrong with that. I respect mothers so much who understand their limits, and are willing to do what they need to do to take care of themselves so that they can then take care of their own baby.
Yeah.
The other side of it is your child is not going to be worse off for learning a new skill. And sleep is a learnt skill. It's instinctual, of course, but so is eating solids and crawling, but it still takes time for babies to learn these skills. So to be able to teach your child how to fall asleep independently, how to link sleep cycles so that their sleep is better quality as well, so that they're rested and, that's going to have a positive flow-on effect to the rest of their sleeps during the day and then their nighttime. And we need sleep to grow. We only grow as humans in our sleep. So babies definitely need sleep. They also become more hungry when they're sleeping properly. So it's increasing their growth, it's increasing their hunger, it's all of those things. So even when parents decide to sleep, I like to call it sleep teaching because it just doesn't sound as harsh.
Yes, I couldn't think of that term, but yes, that's a much nicer term.
It's so much nicer.
Yeah.
But when parents are ready, their child is still going to benefit in every way. Now, in terms of introducing routine, I don't believe we should structure a child's day until they're at least 3 months old.
Yeah.
Before that, they're going through so many growth spurts and milestones, and so many things are happening for them. We need to be more responsive, and often demand feeding is the best for babies from 0 to 3 months of age as well. So whether they're breastfed or bottle fed, although I know you should be a bit more structured with bottle feeds, your babies need you to be responsive to them. So from 3 months is the minimum that I work with families. And so then when we're thinking about your child's signs that they are ready, so things like starting to get more and more frustrated with you with techniques that you're usually doing. So say you're normally rocking or, patting their bum and holding them on your shoulder, and they're like pushing off of you. Things like that they're becoming more frustrated is a big indicator. Also things like back arching is a similar thing, and getting more and more worked up when they should be getting more and more calm. The other factors are if your baby's normally very easily transferred into their own sleep space, like you've managed to get them to go to sleep and then they wake quite quickly when they've been transferred. That's another indicator that they had higher needs of staying in one environment for that sleep. And so that's a sign of readiness to learn to sleep in the sleep environment that they've got to end up in. Those are probably the main ones. Yeah.
Okay. And going, I guess, across to something that has come up so much is like, I hear mums complaining about it / dealing with it, is cat napping. And how does, I wasn't aware of this until after having my first and going through this process of with a sleep consultant, the link between the quality and length of sleep during the day and then the quality of length of sleep in the night. And then also, because we're talking about sleep cycles a lot, maybe can you just explain the length of a sleep cycle, what that actually is? Because if anybody watching is pregnant and they haven't actually gone through this yet, I think that's something valuable to be aware of, because that's often what catnapping is about, isn't it? It's like just a sleep cycle and then they're not linking together and able to sleep longer.
That's exactly right. That's exactly it. And there is a big difference between daytime sleep cycles and nighttime sleep cycles as well. So in terms of their length, daytime sleep cycles can range anywhere from 20 to 50 minutes. So it really just depends on your child and what they're doing. So, I work with some babies that only do 20, 30-minute sleep cycles. So we've got to link multiple, whereas the babies that are doing 45, 50 minutes, we only need to get them to do 2 sleep cycles for it to be like a reasonable length nap. Nighttime sleep cycles can be anywhere between 2 and 4 hours as well. So it just, again, depends on the baby, depends on their age, and their abilities and those sorts of things.
And so if you're dealing with a chronic cat napper, do you almost always then see that is directly affecting the quality of the sleep and in the night and how often they're waking?
Absolutely. So chronic cat nappers are not getting enough restorative and consolidated daytime sleep. So they end up overtired at the end of the day, and then that overtiredness causes things like false starts, multiple wakes overnight, inability to get into deeper sleep states, because the body compensates when it's very overtired by being more hyperactive. And so the brain is just going and going and going, and they will fall asleep because they are tired. But the way that their brain is processing whilst they're sleeping, they're not able to get into those deeper sleep states, and so then they end up waking more frequently.
I find that honestly so interesting, because I remember, I think the thing that sticks with me so much is just sleep creates sleep. I did not know that. And I remember before we hired a sleep consultant, my husband was like, oh, weren't you like, maybe we should just like not let him nap. Maybe he's just like sleeping too much during the day. And she was just like, no, oh my God, no, no, no. And then after I hired a sleep consultant, all my mother's group friends were like, oh my God, what did you do? And we actually set up a session where she came into the mother's group and kind of chatted to everyone. Obviously that's not working one-on-one, but kind of talked through a lot of strategies, and it was just such a game changer. And I think just having, as a first time mum, having this awareness, I think such an important message is, as a first time mum, you don't know this stuff. You're not expected to know this stuff. Your baby did not come with a handbook, let alone a what to do in every scenario if they're not sleeping, and how to figure out why. Is it teething? Are they sick? Do they have a temperature? Is the room too cold? Is the room too hot? So that's where, for me, working with a sleep consultant felt like such a relief, having somebody that I could message and go, he's doing this. What do I do?
Yeah.
And
So
then reflecting back at me, oh, that's completely normal. Try this. It's
yeah.
just, so if you're watching and you're dealing with this situation with a young baby or even a toddler and it's your first, you don't need to know the answers. And it's so worth reaching out for help. And I feel the need to say I'm not affiliated in any way. I don't get any kickbacks if you go and work with Carlene. It's just this is genuinely my experience as a mum. And then I had a really, really good sleeper for my firstborn. I was one of those really annoying, I wasn't smug about it, but I came home and honestly, he slept, I think it was the second night we came home from the hospital. He slept 6 hours. And I remember we woke up and we were just like, oh my God, is he breathing? Why is he been asleep for so long? He's just an amazing sleeper. And then along came my second and I was like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I've got this. Terrible. Just did not, terrible napper. I didn't sleep well overnight. I don't think he slept through till he was I want to say about 14 months. And I was just exhausted. So, yeah. Cannot recommend getting help enough.
It's so helpful,
So helpful.
Yeah.
I'd love to actually, it's not on the list to talk about, but I'd love to get your opinion about actual in-person sleep schools, where people take the baby into the facility and stay.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on sleep schools and how does that differ? Obviously it's in person, but how does it differ to an experience someone might have working with somebody like you?
Yeah, so look, there's definitely a place in society for sleep schools. They are a much more extreme, old school approach to sleep training. So, the majority of schools that I'm aware of, especially in Melbourne, I can't necessarily say for other states, but definitely in Melbourne, the process is that mums get admitted, they're given a sleeping tablet for a 48-hour period, and basically the nurses take baby away into a little room with no windows. It's just this little black box. They do controlled crying with the baby, so completely away from mum, so mum can rest and recuperate and catch up on her sleep, which is obviously very important.
Yeah.
But it's done in a way where the babies are away from mum unless they need to do a breastfeed and things like that. And
Yeah.
for a lot of mums who are already experiencing postnatal anxiety and things like that, going into a situation where one, your baby's taken away from you, you're in a completely foreign environment, you don't know what's happening, you're given medication to make you sleep, it can be quite overwhelming, and a lot of mums find it very overwhelming and don't end up seeing it through. For other mums, they're like, actually, it was amazing. I was at the end of my tether. I was so sleep deprived, and to be given the opportunity to rest and recuperate for a couple of days while the baby was being taken care of by professionals, which they are, and then we see baby on day 3, and then parents are brought into it at that point where they can then learn the technique, but baby's a lot better by that point, so it's not as extreme for them. So there's definitely a place for it. It just depends what your wants are in terms of how your baby is settled, how involved you want to be, how you feel about your child being taken away from you. The benefits of working with a sleep consultant, whether it's online, like via a Zoom consult, or in your home, is that we look at what your sleep environment looks like and we create a plan to suit your sleep environment. Whereas when you go and do sleep school, you got to then recreate the sleep environment that they had at sleep school and bring it back home. And we all know that babies don't just adjust to a new sleep environment. It takes days. So parents often see regressions. Sorry, I can just hear my daughter upstairs, but my husband.
Like when
Like
they're on duty, but you can still hear them, and you're like, oh,
the door's open and the monitor's quite loud. Um, yeah, parents often see regressions when they come home from sleep school because the child's
yeah.
got to readjust to their own environment that they've pretty much forgotten about after 5 days. And sometimes because the parents weren't involved right from the beginning, it's really hard for them to get back on top of it. And so you're like, oh, we were gone a week, we came back and we were in the best routine, the baby was sleeping, then we came home and it all fell apart. And that is such a common story that I hear. So at least when we set up your sleep plan from looking at your environment, I do in-home consults so I can see everything and I'm there to kind of support parents in the moment. But then even when I do online consults, I see videos and photos of the sleep spaces. So I know what I'm working with. I can support parents in how they sleep train in that space, and then the baby's learning the new skill in their own environment right from the get-go, so that's also really helpful.
I I knew that the nurses took the baby off to do some training, but I didn't know that the mums were actually like medicated and like didn't see the baby. That for me personally, I would have found that so distressing. But I think it's really valuable that you've explained that so that people can then make an informed decision whether that is something that's, like you said, when there's a situation where perhaps there is postnatal depression or anxiety or just extreme sleep deprivation and you are at the end of your tether, that might be the right scenario for you. But I think it's so helpful to fully understand what's involved in that process because it is, I can imagine it being very confronting having baby taken away from you. Obviously,
Absolutely.
depending on the age and yeah.
And obviously they're brought back for feeds and things like
Yes.
that, but it's yeah, sporadic because the facility's focus is obviously one to teach baby how to sleep, but two to help mum recuperate. So there have been situations where I've turned away clients and said, I'm not the right person for you. You need someone that can help you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week whilst you implement this, because I'm concerned that you sleep training your child is going to send you over the edge, because even with the most gentle of sleep training techniques and approaches, it is stressful. Like when I do in-home consults, I am stressed hearing somebody else's baby in any way upset, because that's not what I want. Unfortunately, there's no cry technique. That's just not a thing, because we can't control the way a baby reacts and responds and tries to communicate. But it's heart-wrenching sometimes, and when you're on the edge, and I know that there's really bad postnatal anxiety and depression, I know that I'm not enough support for you, and those sorts of places are the perfect thing for them.
They need that level of support. I 100% agree with that. I remember using multiple different settling techniques and just that many times going, I can't. And I think we were at like day 3 or 4, and I knew we were like just on the cusp of a breakthrough, but I was so exhausted. And I said, I just need to pick him up. I can't. And it wasn't about distress, me being distressed hearing him cry. It was more just, I just needed him to go to sleep.
Yeah.
I've been sitting here using this technique and it's not working and it's not happening. And then I'm so glad I persevered because he just got through the sleep regression and just still to this day, he's the best sleeper. So I'm very glad that I persevered. Linking what you said about going home from sleep school and I guess taking your sleeping to different environments, what do you recommend for people when they do have to go to a different mind, like if they're traveling or staying at a family's house? What are kind of your top tips for, I guess, preserving their routine and sleep environment as much as possible?
Yeah, so obviously, if you're staying somewhere, trying to replicate your at-home environment where you're going. So if your child's used to sleeping in a dark sleep environment, bringing even just something as simple as black garbage bags and tape so that you can tape up the windows, and create a dark environment where you are. Then other things like just making sure you're using the same sleep aids, so sleeping bag, dummy if you use it, white noise, those familiar things. And then ideally having at least one nap in your new location. So when it comes to nighttime sleep, it's a little bit more familiar. It's not like such a shock. So, if you're driving to, somewhere for a couple of days or a holiday or a holiday house or something, leave early on in the day so that you can be at your location for, as I said, at least one nap.
Yes, that's very good advice. And touching on white noise, I'm a huge fan of white noise. We used white noise for both of our kids, and I I actually think I prefer sleeping with white noise now
I
as
love
a result of
it.
that. They
Yeah.
were in the room for so long, and we had it on, and we just had I think we used waves,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is beautiful. Like you feel like you're sleeping next to the beach. It's gorgeous, isn't it? Yeah.
Waves is actually pink noise.
Oh, is it? What's the
Yeah,
difference between white and pink?
so white noise is like this harsh, like the
Oh,
static of a TV
oh,
that's
with
lost
you.
signal. And then pink noise is when it's got more water sounds through it and it's a lot calmer
Oh,
and softer. So
interesting.
yeah, I love pink noise. I think it's fantastic. And if you hear
Yes,
the differences right next to each other, you'll, oh yeah, that's the nicer one.
that makes
There's
so
also
much
brown
sense.
noise, but I'm not sure of what brown noise is. I've just heard about it. I've not heard it
Yeah.
before.
Well, I think I was calling it white noise because we had a white noise machine. But yes, I think the options were like rain, running river, and ocean, which is
Mm,
apparently all pink noise. So I just
mm.
learned something new.
There you go. Pink
Um,
noise is fantastic.
what about pram naps and car naps? Because I feel like this is a hot
Mm.
topic. Obviously, there's the accidental car naps that you just are trying desperately to keep them awake. But what about things like, I guess, planned,
Mm.
going for a walk and letting them have the nap in the pram?
Yeah.
Where do you stand
Well,
on those?
just before I get into that, because you did kind of just touch on the accidental ones, if you're like trying desperately not for them to have, but it's inevitable sometimes, no matter how much you're screaming at them a song at the top of your voice, it just,
Windows open,
sometimes it
pumping the
happens.
radio.
So 5 to 10 minutes is not going to impact your nap. Anything more than that, and it's starting to eat away at the
Yeah.
sleep pressure. So 5 to 10 minutes, and then wake them up if you absolutely can't keep them awake in the first place. Planned naps. So if you're going on a longer journey and you want them to have a nap in the car, for example, you'd want to leave your like home or wherever you're going at least 10 to 15 minutes before they're kind of due for the nap, so they can kind of ease into the environment and settle in and get all snug, and it'll help them fall asleep. You don't want to put them in the car right when they're ready, because that's when they're going to be quite irritable actually, and they want to go to sleep like immediately. So if you give them a chance to just build up to, oh yeah, I'm starting to doze off because I was in this space already, it just makes it so much easier for them to fall asleep. The same goes for pram naps. You can take pram naps one step further by using something like a pram cover to help replicate those darker sleep environments. And you'd still want to start your walk or whatever just before the nap, so that again they can settle into the environment and start switching off and winding down and getting comfortable. And that will actually be what helps them to fall asleep more. So yeah.
I loved doing his 9:30 nap in the pram because it was usually only about a 40-minute nap. It
Yeah.
was a great length for a walk. He was really good at falling asleep in the pram, and yeah, it was really helpful. And yeah, we did all those things you were talking about. We had a pram cover, but are there particular, because I think that's quite an important point, particular things that are safe or not safe to cover the pram with? Because this has been, I've actually seen videos on this where they kind of do an experiment and they put thermometers in the pram and show what happens when you cover with one thing versus another. Are there particular things that you would recommend for people to use?
Yes, absolutely. So, a specifically made pram cover is like the most ideal thing, because they're obviously going to be made to be air permeable, so that oxygen levels are going to be high and it's not going to get too hot in there and all those sorts of things. So I've got a product called Baby Sleep Pods, which are exactly that. They're made to fit every single pram with an air permeable mesh, so that they're safe. They create that darker sleep environment, and they are going to help support those on-the-go naps by reducing distractions whilst on the go, but then also, because it's created that darker sleep environment, encouraging the melatonin production process. There are some pram covers that you can put on, but they leave the bottom part of the pram open, so you kind of only like a large or an extended hood. They're okay, they're good for sun protection, but if you want your baby to sleep when they're in that more reclined position, they're going to be looking directly at the open part, so they're not so beneficial. Then from a safety perspective, there are issues with muslin wraps and blankets covering the pram. They heat up the pram and don't allow that oxygen flow, so that's dangerous. There's also been people have been known to use rain covers and then put a blanket over the top of the rain cover.
Oh God,
And
no.
so
It's like a greenhouse.
it's exactly what it is, and
Literally.
oxygen can't flow in and out properly, and it gets very, very hot and muggy inside, and it's just not a good thing. You also want something that you can quite easily look into the pram, so you can see what baby's doing. So again, just going back to the pram cover, the Baby Sleep Pods, they have a flap that you can lift up and look at baby as frequently as you want to, so that you can keep an eye. Pram covers, especially the universal ones, they're fantastic. They usually fit all prams, bassinets and capsules that fit into a pram base, but people need to know that there is absolutely no reason to use them in the car. So people are like, oh, that will help them have a nap in the car, but it's dangerous because then you can't see what baby's doing. So then if you really want to make the car a little bit darker or less, in your face bright, there are things like snap shades that attach to your car windows to darken the window.
Yes, that's a massive one. I just wanted to touch on sleep aids as well. I guess things like dummies and things like riffraffs. Obviously, we're not using anything like a riffraff until they're a lot older. But what are your thoughts on sleep aids, and do you recommend, not recommend? Is it kind of case by case basis?
So comforters are a fantastic option for children that have otherwise always fallen asleep with a parent. Like if they feel like they need that comfort, they're a great option. From a safety perspective, only from 8 months of age should we introduce a comforter, just because it can end up on their face, and that's a problem. I'm going to say something quite controversial, but I hate riffraffs.
Really?
The toys themselves are beautiful. They're a really good high quality comforter, but the mechanism inside them are really problematic from a sleep consultant's perspective. So the fact that the noise, whether it's the white noise, the lullaby, you can also voice record things now, any of those things, they turn off at either 20 or 40 minutes. Right?
Oh, right when the sleep cycle is gonna.
Exactly. And the way a baby falls asleep is how they want to stay asleep. So if you're using something as they're falling asleep, it's something that needs to stay with them. Otherwise, they're more likely to wake up. So you want a sleep aid that is going to remain on for the duration of the nap or the overnight sleep. And a lot of white noise machines are exactly that. My first daughter, I actually used an old mobile phone, and I got an app that played different things, and that was just a great option for us. But you want it to be consistent.
Yes. It's funny you should say that, because I had a riffraff with my second born. I was just gifted one, and we didn't use the white noise because for that reason, we noticed that when it went off, he would wake up. So he just had it, and actually he didn't, shouldn't say this, but he didn't really like it. It was his personal preference. But he loved his dummy, which I found quite confronting, because my firstborn, I'm not somebody who's like, oh, you shouldn't use dummies. But my firstborn just didn't like them.
Mm.
He was very much, when he got a bit older, we had a comforter that's got all these tabs all around it. I don't know if you've seen those ones. He
Yes,
still
I
has
have.
it.
Yeah.
Up
Yep.
until up until grade one, every night he would suck on one of the tabs to fall asleep, and that was just his thing. And he would suck on the tabs, and he would go like this until he fell asleep, just rubbing the blanket.
Yeah.
Whereas my second, he was dummies, dummies, dummies. He would have like 15 dummies all around him in the cot and his bed.
Whatever
Um,
works, right?
yes. So, where do you stand on dummies and the use of dummies, and what age they should be ideally transitioned off a dummy? Because I think that's quite a
Yeah.
hot topic as well.
Look, I love a dummy. I have no problem incorporating them in the plans and just making sure that they're, as long as they're not problematic. If they're not a problem,
Mm.
the child's not reliant on somebody else constantly putting it back into their mouth, or the baby's sleeping in a really light phase of sleep constantly, so that when it falls out, they notice it. But you can train them out of that anyway, so that they don't feel like they need it necessarily. Um, but I'm all for dummies. I'm all for any sleep aid as long as it's safe, that's going to help with sleep. I usually say by 2 years of age, you want it one. 2-year-olds are at a good age of understanding too, so you can explain, the dummy fairy, or it's going to Santa, or there's like dummy flowers now, so you plant the dummy, and like there's all these things now, but it becomes like a thing where they understand it, and then when they ask for it, you're like, oh no, remember we planted it to make a flower, or we sent it to Santa, or whatever it is. But they understand, so it makes it easier for them to drop it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my son was 3. And so, actually, just looping back to that, what's the main reason for the 2-year-old? Is that to do with development of their jaw
Jaw and teeth.
placement? Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. You want to kind of get rid of it by the time the 2-year-old molars come in, because that's when you'll start to notice the shape. Children that have the dummy have like that shape. So, but before that, until those molars come in, they don't seem to shift too much. So
That's what started happening with my son, and the dummy fairy came.
yeah.
But what happened was, when you think you've got rid of them all, but you have,
Left one
I don't know
somewhere
how many
find
dummies
it.
we bought. Oh my gosh. And he just kept finding them like under his bed, and so we had to do a full sweep of the house, but we did notice that the shape of his teeth were definitely starting to shift. But it's so interesting because after, I think, probably 3 or 4 months, we really saw that shape kind of fix itself
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
the dummy going away. I
Yeah.
think probably an important point about dummies as well is when they are used. So I guess, guessing from your perspective, you only want them to be brought out at nap time and sleep time, because I see a lot of kids that kind of just have them in their mouth all day, or
Yeah.
a large portion of the time. Would you prefer that they're only used at nap times?
I love when they're just used at nap times, because it's an extra aid that's going to support them in their sleep. The other thing, I like to take that next step further, and I have them in the cot, and I don't like parents giving the dummy to the child. I want them to be placed in the cot and the child puts it in their own mouth, because then it becomes second nature that they give it to themselves. So they build up that ability or confidence, or they don't then expect mum and dad to put the dummy in every time it falls out. Like it's the child's job essentially. So it works that little bit harder as the sleep aid.
I do hear that a lot actually. Mum's complaining about having to wake up and put the dummy back on. What about dummy clips? Are they safe, not safe? Where do we
Yeah,
stand
they're
on?
safe. I mean, obviously there's ones that are rubbish, like they do
Yes.
fall off, and so you want to make sure you get a good quality one. But as long as you've got a good quality one, then they're a great option. You just want to make sure that they're short, not long enough that it can go around the neck, because obviously that's problematic.
Yes. I think an important point that we haven't touched on yet actually is sleep regressions.
Yeah.
How many sleep regressions are
Too
are
many.
there?
There's too many.
Yeah, right. When
Um,
is the last one meant to be, when they're about 4? Sorry, not to frighten any parents who are who are watching.
No,
So
those are more
many.
behavioral regressions, right?
Okay,
So
yeah.
they kind of just impact everything. So
Hmm.
there is the 4 month, there's a little one at 6 months, there's the 8, 9, 10 month one. It usually happens somewhere in that bracket, just depends on the child. The 12-month sleep regression, the 18-month sleep regression, and then the 2-year-old sleep regression. So they all are caused by different things. The 4-month-old sleep regression is caused by the internal body clock maturing. So those sleep cycles go from being baby sleep cycles, which are here, there, and everywhere, to being adult-like sleep cycles. And that is a big thing for a baby to adjust to, because they're like, I should be sleeping all of this time like I was, but now I'm coming to an end of a sleep cycle. Like, what is that? And it can be difficult for them to adjust to that. So it actually can take 4 to 6 weeks for them to adjust to it. And even then, some babies don't. And that's when someone like me would come in and needs and helps them relearn how to fall asleep and stay asleep properly. The other sleep regressions are a combination of routine adjustments being required. So the routine that they're currently having is just no longer appropriate for them.
Yeah, okay.
And also like developmental milestones. So starting to crawl, starting to walk, starting to say words, those sorts of things. So those ones are typically at the 6, 8, 9, 10 one and the 12-month one. They're all a combination of those factors. So if you think about, usually around the 6-month mark, they start to roll and maybe think about crawling. Then at anywhere between 8, 9, and 10 months, they're starting to potentially pull themselves up on furniture, or that's when they're starting to crawl if they didn't do it at the previous one. 12 months, they're starting to walk, maybe saying the first couple of words, those sorts of things. And then there's also the routine itself that needs to be updated, because we're moving from 4 naps to 3 naps to 2 naps to 1 nap, so all of those things are a contributing factor to those regressions. 18 months is usually a big like developmental occurrence with language. And that's a really big one, understanding how parents can leave and what that distance means and things like that. So there's also a big separation anxiety component of it. And then the 2-year-old one is a bit of a switch from it being like a biological regression to being a behavioral regression. So it can sometimes be biological in terms of maybe they're having too much nap time, or things like that, or their day is off balance. But then the 2-year-old is when they start to understand boundaries, and boundaries are no longer the constraints of a physical thing like the cot. Boundaries are mental as well, and you can push back and say no and do all those sorts of things. So there's a few different causes, and unfortunately there is a lot of them.
Yes, sleep regressions.
Yeah.
I think actually you kind of touched on an important point then about awake windows and napping. How do parents tell if the child is ready to drop a nap?
So usually you'll see signs of it. So let's just say we're going from 3 naps to 2 naps. Well, you're going to run out of time because the awake windows are getting longer and longer. So you're just going to run out of time for that 3rd nap. They're sleeping and then fight, like they're sleeping well for the first couple of naps, but then really fighting the last one. Their good quality naps start to shorten and they're starting to wake up more, or their overnight sleep is affected. So they were sleeping really well and now all of a sudden they're not, and they're having like a middle of the night party. Those are all some big, split night is a big thing, and that's usually caused by too much day sleep. So you'd have to look at what's happening with their naps, what's age appropriate, and adjust from there.
You can look up online also, I think, quite easily awake windows, and I find that so helpful. And obviously they're estimated, and not every child will fall into that, and you kind of have to read the signs as well. But the other thing I found super helpful was the Wonder Weeks app.
I love
There's a
Wonder
book with
Weeks.
it, but the Wonder Weeks app, if you haven't already got it, mums, I just find it really helpful to be able to go in when you are going through one of those phases where you're like, what's wrong? Are you teething? Are you sick? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? All those kind of the checklist that you go through, to go into the app and see, oh, well, actually, they're in this phase at the moment and expect these things to be happening. It kind of just helps you to kind of calm down a bit and realize, as much as it sucks that they're going through an apparent regression, it is very normal,
Yes.
and it will pass. I
Yeah.
liked that it kind of showed you roughly where the light at the end of the tunnel would be. It's not always going to be,
Not
on the
completely
money.
accurate, but it gives you an idea.
Yeah, it gives you an idea, and I think that really helps.
Yeah.
If anybody does have any questions, you can pop them in the chat, or you can always, I'm sure your inbox is always open.
Oh, absolutely.
comes
Always
to-
open and always full.
Yes, I can imagine. Oh my gosh, how many DMs do you get every day from like tired mums? Do you get so many?
It's different every day, usually between 5 and 10 a day. Yeah, so whether it's DMs or bookings for discovery calls, just to chat about what's going on with their situation and how I can help. Lots of questions left on my posts on social media, which is really nice. So like I love answering as many questions as I can, because sometimes you don't need like a whole sleep plan and a this and a that. Sometimes you just need, this is what you just a little adjustment, routine adjustment. Well, you've got a 15-month-old who's still having 2 long naps, and usually 15-month-olds are closer to 1 nap than they are 2. So start by shortening the first nap and slowly starting to drop it off, so we get closer and closer to 1 nap. That's probably going to help a lot of those really basic things that sometimes when you're in those situations, you're like, I just don't know how to get out of it, and I think I need somebody. But a lot of these questions allow me to either say, this is all you got to do and it's gonna fix everything, or then be able to say, look, there's a lot going on for you here, and I think consultation would be a great option. But at least when people reach out, I can give them an idea of what that's going to look like.
Definitely. Please don't be afraid to ask a question in the chat, or to ask a question, like I said, after the live has wrapped up. We have been discussing doing a bit of a series of these as well, because I think it is something that people need so much help with. What do you think some of the most common questions that you get are?
Oh, why is my child catnapping?
Yeah, I feel like catnapping's huge.
It's huge. It's probably one of my top questions. The other ones are like, how do I get my child to self-settle or not be so reliant on feeds to sleep and things like that? I'm going back to work, that sort of stuff. What's an appropriate amount of sleep for a baby at this age, that age, those sorts of things. But often it's around catnapping.
Yes. I agree. That's why I brought it up earlier. I think and just also, having lots of mum friends, I just hear it so much, is the catnapping just kind of driving them mental, because it's not just about the quality of sleep that the child is then getting at night. It's also about the mum just not getting really any quality break during the day.
Absolutely.
To get stuff dher or sleep, or just binge Netflix and have some time to herself.
Absolutely. I had a mum that I worked with on Monday, and by Tuesday her 7-month-old was doing a 2-hour nap, and I was like, oh my God, did you put your feet up and relax and just enjoy? And she's like, I did a gym workout, because they have a home gym. And I'm like, oh my God. Good on you. I mean, I guess for some people that's the way that they
they feel
better. So that it's so great. And the amount of times that I hear, gosh, I didn't know what to do with myself, I had a whole hour and a half to myself. Like, I haven't had that since my baby was born, and or months and months. And it's just like it's so rewarding to feel like I'm helping give that back to parents. It's amazing.
I actually feel like in the days when we were a tribal people, and I think this is still something to me that's really beautiful about a lot of Indigenous communities, and even really kind of isolated tribes, where there's still that sense of the baby being raised by the mother and the elders and the grandparents and all of the the elder women of the group, I feel like in a sense what you do is kind of that sort of elder wisdom coming in to support families, because I think the way our society is structured now, we've kind of really lost that.
Yeah.
And like I said, for me, that feeling of relief when I had that sleep consultant there to talk to, I think there is this kind of unspoken pressure on new mums when they go home to feel like they're supposed to know what to do. And the amount of time you hear, and even, I see memes and reels and TikToks about like how many times I Googled, is this color baby poo normal? Is it normal that I remember thinking my son was so sick, because you know how they go through all the different poo, the newborn poos?
Yep.
He went to the like grainy stage, and I remember ringing nurse on call and be like, oh my god, he's done like 9 poos today, I think he's got gastro, he's so young, blah blah blah. And she was like, describe the poo to me. And I'm like, what? It's like, does it look kind of like mustard seeds? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, yeah, that's this type of poo, and it's totally normal. But I think it's so important to get that message out there, that you, like I've said it before on this live, but I just think it's such an important point that I'll repeat it, that you are not expected to know everything. Yes, 100% Google, but reach out, whether it is a lactation specialist, a sleep consultant, midwife, whatever support you need.
Absolutely.
It's so vital. And we have lost, I think a lot of people have also, because of the international society we've become, like for me, my parents are overseas. I didn't even have my mum here, and I think that's increasing more and more as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just super valuable. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, thank you. You're very
Thank you for
welcome.
your time. And as I said, I don't think we've got any questions in the chat. If you've got a question, feel free to pop it in the chat. But I've really enjoyed this. I've learned some new things as well.
I'm glad.
And I think it would be really fun to do a couple more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we can go more into the toddlerhood stuff, and we can brainstorm what to chat about next time, and also get some feedback from our lovely viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great.
Thank you to everybody who joined us, and we will see you guys again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting this, and thanks again to everybody else that tuned in and watched. And if anybody does have any other questions, send me a DM, or we're both on Instagram, so you can come and follow us over there and send us a DM.
Yes. Did you change your tag on Instagram? I think I saw before. Did it change, or was that just what it comes up as in the messenger?
Oh, I
still,
haven't changed anything.
Oh no, it says baby, gentle baby sleep. Oh no, I just want to make sure I'm sending them to the right thing. So
oh yeah,
your Instagram handle is Sweet Dreamers Sleep Consulting.
Sleep Consulting. Yeah, that's right.
Just when it's in the DM, it just says your name and then Gentle Sleep Consulting.
Yeah, yeah, that's my yeah.
Yes, no, that's fine. Yes, make sure you go and follow. And we'll see you next time. We'll let you know when we are scheduling the live. So may you have a wonderful night's sleep.
Yes, thank you. You too.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.